Something that a lot of Miamians don't realize is the fact that we are a cultural capital in the world. And what sets us apart from other cities that are cultural capitals is our cultural mix. You won't find this kind of cultural mix anywhere else in the world.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring the innovators, disruptors, and creators who are making things happen today. My name is Michael T.JOHNSON. I'm here with my co-host Tyler KELLEY, and we're at Venture Cafe Miami. Now, Venture Cafe is the largest weekly gathering of innovators anywhere in the world. So we're super excited today because we have Farris Bukhari with us.
Hi there.
Welcome, Farris. Farris, for those of you out there in podcast land, he is the founder of 10B Live Arts Incubator right here in Miami. He is a multi-disciplinary theater practitioner with over 20 years of experience on stage as a performer, as well as behind the scenes as a writer, director, facilitator, enabler, and producer. And Farris, you formed 10B to kind of address some of the needs that you're seeing here in Miami, and you're in the process of making that happen on a large scale, right? So kind of tell me a little bit about like some of those needs that.
Sure, yeah. First of all, thank you for having me here. And yes, 10B really is a culmination of years of thought and experience having come to Miami about 5 years ago. You can probably tell from my accent that I'm not a native Miamian, but I like to consider myself a local.
Who is, right?
Exactly.
These days.
But when I arrived here, I realized that although there were these great pockets of creativity in the city and really interesting pools of talent, there was very little in terms of an ecosystem tying everything together, very little in terms of a mesh that kind of pulls everything together, not that much of a support system for our live artists, and a lot of communities that were to an extent underserved. And of course there are exceptions to this rule, but this is what I noticed overall. And really it made me think back to some of my experiences as a live artist and as a producer, the lack of opportunities that I had at one point in my life. This idea of creating a center that would support live artists, offer communities the opportunity to not only witness live art, but participate in the creation of it, is something that I've been very passionate about for a very long time. And Miami, at this time in its lifespan, is the perfect place and the perfect time to be.
So what makes Miami the perfect place, like more so than any other city in the world?
Well, I think the title of your podcast really sums it up nicely, Innovation City. This is a city that has so much energy and flexibility and youthfulness to it. You can reinvent the wheel here, whereas you can't in more established cities. Something that a lot of Miamians don't realize or maybe don't necessarily accept for whatever reason is the fact that we are a cultural capital in the world. There's no doubt about it. And what sets us apart from other cities that are cultural capitals is our cultural mix. You won't find this kind of cultural mix anywhere else in the world. It is really unique to Miami, and that mix of cultures and heritage and traditions and live arts backgrounds really is what sets this city apart from any other. And it's what offers a great opportunity for something like innovation in the live arts.
Now, when you're talking about live arts, what specifically define that for us and for the viewers?
Sure. So when I'm talking about the live arts, it's a very broad umbrella. Really, you're talking about anything which involves live storytelling to an audience. Most importantly, or most typically, that would be theater, spoken word poetry, dance, physical theater, circus arts, music, and anything that kind of falls in between. And really what 10B Live Arts Incubator is aiming to do is opening up the floodgates of multidisciplinary collaboration, something that doesn't happen a lot in this city, but it does happen in a lot of other cultural capitals. And I think that's where the secret to our success really is here in Miami because of our cultural mix. To appeal to as broad an audience as possible and to include as many communities as possible, you want to look at a multidisciplinary and cross-cultural approach to the creation of the arts.
So you're really seeing like a potential in Miami that you're not seeing in any other city for the live arts because of the cultural makeup and all those things.
Absolutely. I think every city in the world, especially diverse cities like Miami, have the potential, but Miami has an unmined potential, and it has really interesting theatrical and performance traditions that are at the moment hyper-localized. And the idea of 10B is to open that up and really bring them into more of a melting pot. We have a really unique tapestry here, and it's a matter of bringing these different elements in. I think when you look at cities like New York and London and Paris, you're looking at cities that have been doing the same thing for the past 200 years in a very specific way. And although there is innovation in those cities, because of the flexibility that we have here in Miami, because of the newness of everything here in Miami, the potential for that kind of flexibility and innovation is much broader than it would be in any of these other cities.
You know, that's a great point. When I think about what makes Miami, I think of Miami, it's like a naturally caffeinated city. We were born and raised in the Midwest, and we drink a lot of coffee, but when we come down here, we don't find ourselves drinking as much coffee because of the energy that's just everywhere. You can feel it. I was talking to a Miami native yesterday, and he said that the Miami that you see today, if for natives that left 5 years ago, it's not the same Miami. Like, it's constantly evolving, and I would assume it's like that in the live arts scene as well. Like, how does that influx of energy into that scene affect what's being put out on a consistent basis?
That's a really interesting question, and it's a very interesting point to explore because Miami is something of a transient city. We do have a lot of people who are coming and going on a regular basis, although I think there's a lot more stability now than there was maybe 10 years ago in terms of the transience of our communities. I think what's really interesting here is that the energy of the city doesn't necessarily manifest itself at the moment so much in the live arts. You have some breakthrough venues like Miami Light Project, which probably has some of the most interesting programming in the city, and breakthrough groups like New Deco Ensemble that does incredible and really innovative work. But by and large, there are a lot of missed opportunities, I think, for cultivating that energy and turning it into something that is really innovative and really unique.
So I'm curious about the idea of 10B. Where did it start with to begin with? What was your inspiration?
My inspiration really was my experience as a teenager and a young adult. So to give you a bit of a background, I'm half British, half Jordanian. I was born in the UK, but spent my formative years in Jordan in the Middle East, where at the time, and things have changed since then, but at the time, there weren't a lot of cultural outlets, and specifically in the theatrical world, there wasn't a lot going on at all. I knew from quite an early age that I wanted to pursue a career in theater and performance, and I realized at the age of 16 or 17 that would just be impossible at that moment in time in Jordan. So I left. I was lucky enough to be able to move to the UK as I have a British passport and pursue my acting career there with great success. But I think that really is what inspires me in terms of the inspiration for creating 10B. Because when I moved to Miami, I realized that to a much lesser extent, there were still those kinds of issues here that I was facing as a young artist in Jordan. And I wanted to offer artists here the opportunity of self-determination. And self-determination is a big part of the ethos of 10B. This idea that you can't wait for somebody to offer you an opportunity. You have to create the opportunity yourself. And it may sound very cliche, but as now, a 40-plus-year-old looking back, if I could say one thing to my younger self, it would be, don't wait for somebody to give you an opportunity.
So that's what you're seeing kind of over and over, and the problem in that community is that people aren't creating their opportunities. They're just kind of waiting for their break.
They're waiting for their break, or they're leaving. So we suffer a lot in terms of brain drain in the arts. A lot of people who start out here then move to New York or to Chicago or to LA to continue pursuing their careers. Some of them come back after a number of years and decide to follow that self-determination path. A lot of people do not. So offering more opportunities for live artists here is a way to keep them here. And the vision of 10B is that eventually we will reverse that process where we will actually be benefiting from brain gain rather than brain drain.
So how does that? How do you do that? Because it just clicked with me. The best of the best, or those who see that they have a future, they go to New York or LA. How do you combat that? How do you make Miami more desirable than for the art in the live arts, New York or LA?
Well, there's no silver bullet, and it's not an overnight success story. This is something that is going to take a long time because it's a matter of changing mindsets, and mindsets are the most difficult thing to change, right? The idea is, if you start a movement where you are creating a supportive community, a supportive ecosystem for the live arts, and you are offering artists the opportunity to express themselves artistically, to go out there and put down roots in communities, not only create work out of thin air, but create work that tells the stories of their local communities, then you are offering them an opportunity for self-determination that they wouldn't necessarily have in cities that we might be competing with, like New York or LA, because over there, the field is saturated. Whereas here, you are really looking at a blue ocean when it comes to the live arts. So you can be a big fish in a relatively small pond here and really leave your mark. And I think that is what, at the beginning at least, will set Miami apart from its competition.
Have you been able to see examples of that? I'm just, I know we always know the person that made it big out in LA or New York, but are you seeing that happen in some communities that are outside of those mainstream areas?
You see it happening here to an extent. You have a number of artists, and at the moment, in terms of the live arts, it really is a handful. But people that come to mind are people like Pioneer Winter, who has Pioneer Winter Dance Collective, Teo Castellanos, who is an actor and director and a writer, Rosie Herrera, who is a dancer. These are people who have made it big to the extent that Rosie Herrera probably spends more time performing outside of Miami in cities like New York, but still calls Miami her home and comes back here to create her work and uses local artists and gives back to the community. So those are really the examples that 10B wants to build upon, because that is our vision for the future, more of these artists. But you do have smaller cities, places like DC, Richmond, where you have a really, really rich live arts scene that is very self-sufficient. And yes, artists will always go to LA if they have a big film role that they're auditioning for, or to New York for a Broadway show audition, because those things are always going to be appealing to artists. But there are cities where this kind of format works.
So how do you start kind of breaking down that perception? Like, where are you starting to get people to realize exactly what you're talking about, like that they can be really effective in a community like Miami?
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to start at the source. Something that I'm a big believer in is the power of education. And if you offer kids the opportunity to express themselves artistically, which unfortunately we're losing more and more in our education system here, but if they have that opportunity, then that's something that they will carry with them. If they have the opportunity to see the live arts, then that is something that they will become more accustomed to, and you build that kind of loyalty in them, that kind of intrigue in them for the live arts. But it's also a matter of going back to the community level. I don't think that a top-down approach for something like this would work, because it requires trust from the community. And this is why I've been working hard to create relationships with local community centers and cultural centers in all of the different neighborhoods and districts of Miami, so that we have a conduit to these communities that will look at me and will say, well, who's this guy who's parachuting in from England to tell us what to do? But having the partnership of these community centers adds that element of trust. And that's really where you need to start. Because if you offer communities that wouldn't necessarily otherwise have the opportunity to express themselves on a larger stage to a broader, more diverse audience, I think that they would probably jump at the opportunity.
So what does the future look like for Miami? You're accomplishing your goal. Your 10B is you're getting artists in, like they're doing their thing. What does that look like?
It looks like innovation. Just as Miami's becoming a great place for tech innovation, it has a potential to be a great place for innovation in the live arts. And really that is what it comes down to in terms of 10B. It's obviously wants to engage with the communities, obviously wants to give opportunities and level the playing field for everybody in this city. But most importantly, its mission is to create innovative, groundbreaking live arts that will set Miami apart from the rest of the country. The idea that we will transform this city from mainly a consumer to a producer of the live arts, where we are exporting our talent, where we are sending troops out for statewide tours or even international tours. That is the final goal of 10B. It is to make Miami a destination for the live arts, but also to create a vernacular, a performative vernacular, which is really unique to this city, that can be recognized anywhere in the world.
You know, that's interesting. Innovation in the arts. So you mentioned Broadway. Obviously, there's Hollywood. Those, you go to LA if you want to, if you have a shot at Hollywood. Broadway, New York. Do you have an idea at this point what it is for Miami, or is it still kind of in that trying to figure it out as a community stage, or is there that thing?
I don't think there is that thing which is fully formed yet, which is why it's important to go back to the community. What I'm doing at the moment, and you know, we are still at the very beginnings of this journey, is listening to the communities, is having focus groups and roundtables, finding out what interests our communities. And that's really where you start. In my mind, from the conversations that I've had so far about this, and I've been working on this now for close to a year, is that our special sauce is multidisciplinary work. So is the mixing of different elements, is the mixing of dance and music and text, and all of these different kind of theatrical or storytelling elements to create something which is really unique. And that's where our success lies, in my opinion, because that is how you break down the silos that currently exist between our different communities and our different disciplines.
I mean, that seems to make sense to me from what I have experienced in Miami, that so much is kind of like a mashup or a mix of culture and different things that are happening. So it seems like that makes sense to me. So
yeah, and it's something that really sets Miami apart. You know, people refer to New York as a melting pot, whereas that is not true for Miami at all. We're a tapestry. We have all of these different blocks of communities, these different blocks of cultures that are all woven into the same fabric of the city, but they are very much separate. And the idea of 10B is to take that tapestry and maybe start slowly transforming it into a salad, so that although they're still separate and individual in their entities, they're all mixed in the same bowl.
So if either I'm a live artist or like you, which it sounds like you're really trying to build a community, what advice do you have?
That's a very good question. I would say my biggest piece of advice would be leap before you look. Don't wait to start until you feel that you are ready, because that time may never come. Don't listen to the naysayers, because there are always going to be people who are doubting Thomases. And if you have a passion and a belief, then to follow that. But also, and I think maybe most importantly along this journey, is sweat equity. It's easy to put your money where your mouth is sometimes, or to raise funds for something, but really it's the blood, sweat, and tears that you put into a project that really offers the trust and the appreciation of the people that you are doing this for.
I like that. I think those 3 tips could cross, any discipline.
Absolutely.
Really, I mean, that's what I would call universal wisdom. So if you want to make it happen, you just got to make it happen.
Absolutely.
Which was your point at the beginning.
Yeah. And this is the thing. I mean, you cannot... There's no reason to look at the live arts differently than you do at the tech industry, for instance, or the tourism industry, in terms of innovation, in terms of your goals and creating something new. Because at the end of the day, it's another sector, it's another industry. Just because it is the arts doesn't mean that it hasn't got the structure or the intrinsic financial value that those other sectors do have.
So let's switch over to 10B. Tell me, where can I find out about 10B and how can I get involved?
You can find us at 10blivearts.com. On social media, we are at 10blivearts. And there's information on the website and on our social media platforms for getting in touch with us. And I would encourage anybody who's interested in the live arts from whatever angle, whether that's backstage, on stage, writing, directing, or just as an audience member, to get in touch and reach out, because it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a whole community to make something like this work.
And funding.
Absolutely.
You want to give Farris some money?
Please, if
Go
anyone
to
has any
10B
money
Live
that they
Arts.
want to donate to 10B, I am welcoming you with open arms.
So, before we end the conversation, I am curious, where did 10B, what's that mean? Where did it come from?
That's an interesting story, actually. So 10B is the climate zone that Miami falls in. And actually, it's just Miami and a small swathe of southern Florida that falls in the climate zone or plant hardiness zone of 10B, which means that it basically denotes our tropical and subtropical climate and the kinds of flora and fauna that can grow here in Miami. We are the only place in the continental USA that falls under the 10B zone. Nowhere else on the continental USA has the 10B zone. And the idea of 10B Live Arts Incubator is that our possibilities in terms of the live arts are just as unique as the kinds of plants that can grow here because of our tropical climate.
I love it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful description. So last question is, where can people connect with you?
So people can reach me personally online at, I do actually have a separate website for myself, which is farrisbukhari.com. But also on social media, Twitter and Instagram, it's at Farris Almighty, all one word. And Facebook is just Farris Bukhari.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
It's been great speaking with you too. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Farris. For more episodes, visit innovationcity.co. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. And if you're in Miami, visit us on Thursday nights. Details are at venturecafemiami.org. And be sure to connect with us on social at We Are Slam and at Venture Cafe MIA. Thanks for listening.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to